And I just wanted to give you a couple highlights of our tour because it's been pretty amazing. In 2.5 weeks, we've been in about 13 or 14 cities, events, and this is actually the final event of the tour. So it's very special to be here with you all. Many people here who are doing like double duty with the peace movement in Seattle and Everett. We started actually the day before the scheduled tour began in San Diego. Mike Kopp-Schubert from Germany and I went down across the border to Playa Tijuana to meet with a group of deported veterans. So they call themselves the deported veterans because that's what they are. Veterans who were not citizens, but lived in this country and joined the U.S. military explicitly because they were told it was the path to citizenship, and instead they find themselves excluded from their own country, unable to return now. Now, some of them were convicted of felony offenses, and that was the excuse for deporting them, and they obviously hadn't received their citizenship that they were promised when they joined the military, or else they couldn't have been deported. But others don't even have any serious offense on their record. And there was a law passed by Congress in 1996 that allowed immigration authorities to go back and look at people's records 20 years back and see what they could find, unpaid parking tickets, a bus for a little marijuana in your pocket, this kind of thing is the excuse they're using to push these veterans out of their own country, just as they're pushing a whole lot of GIs out of the military right now as they're downsizing. We see this whole trend where people are being kicked out en masse, oftentimes with other than honorable discharges, which means they get no veterans benefits, no treatment for their PTSD, which is oftentimes the cause of why they were maybe had some disciplinary problems that caused them to be forced out in the first place. So, the military should know better than anybody else about that PTSD and be taking care of these people, but instead they're pushing them out onto the streets with no support at all, which just gives further exposes the lie of the whole slogan "support the troops," which they tried to silence the anti-war voices with that, and they're not supporting the troops, and these deported veterans actually being forced out of their own country because they've most of them actually grew up here. We even heard that there were 4 Iraqi veterans who were served in the U.S. military, maybe actually fought in Iraq. They've been deported back to Iraq and are reportedly hiding in the mountains somewhere, afraid for their lives right now. So it's outrageous. Anyway, we hooked up with those folks, and thanks to Micah, and we formed some strong relationship with them, and we're going to be continuing to expose their situation and try to bring more support to them. We were in Los Angeles for the 10th anniversary of Arlington West, which is this huge display of the crosses and other markers indicating all the U.S. soldiers who died in Iraq and Afghanistan and/or committed suicide, plus the Iraqi and Afghani victims themselves. It's something that Veterans for Peace in Los Angeles has been putting that up on the beach at the Santa Monica Pier, where thousands of people from all over the world see it every week. Every Sunday for 10 years they've been doing that. Pretty remarkable. So we're really amazed. We had a lot of great events and met a lot of great people. We were able to, Ann Wright joined our activities in San Francisco, Colonel Ann Wright, many of you know. And we were able to follow her up to Beale Air Force Base for the monthly anti-drone protests up there. So we were up there for Monday and Tuesday and stayed overnight and participated in that, and were able to speak to the folks there and share a lot of information because they're trying to figure out how to reach out to the GIs on the Air Force Base there at Beale. And we're going to have representatives of the 3 coffee houses, and that's, of course, Coffee Strong and Under the Hood in Colleen, Texas, by Fort Hood, and the Clearing Barrel GI Bar and Coffee House in Kaiserslautern, Germany. So you're going to be hearing from people from all 3 of those coffee houses. And starting with Malachi Muncie. He's an Iraq veteran. He's deployed twice to Iraq, and he'll tell you about that. He is now the manager of Under the Hood Cafe and Outreach Center in Colleen, Texas, right outside Fort Hood, the biggest U.S. military base.
So, my name is Malachi Muncie, and I've been the manager there at Under the Hood since December of 2012. But I first came into the coffee house in February of 2009, the month that it opened. That's five years, last month now, I guess. 5 years that we've been open there. Like Gerry said, I'm a veteran. I'm also a military family member. I was raised there at Fort Campbell, Fort Bliss, Fort Hood mainly. And my dad was in the Army. And I didn't really want to join the military so much as to get away from situations at home. The National Guard recruiter caught me talking to the Army recruiter and said, "No, I can tell you don't want to do that, so do this." And I was a truck driver. And my first deployment, 0405, I came back and I had a lot of adjustment issues. And after a suicide attempt, I volunteered to go back to Iraq because I couldn't adjust to living here very well. And as soon as I got there, I was like, oh, what the heck did I do? Look at where I am, what I'm doing. I can't do this to myself over and over again. And I started journaling and trying to be really aware of like how exactly did I end up in a place that I didn't want to be like this? How did I let this happen? And to try to prevent it from happening again. And you know, in that introspect and that looking around, I realized that there's a lot of messed up things going on around me. Racism, dehumanization in general, sexism, all these things. And that those experiences, which seem so common to me, weren't really being represented in many of the commonly accepted narratives about military experience. And so I came back and I got a job at a newspaper there in the military town because I was going to like expose the truth and change the world there at a newspaper in a military town. But it didn't go. I was sort of naive, I think, then. But I did learn about Under the Hood from a reporter that was at a competing paper. We were doing school board, and I was telling her about my experiences and how, like, why I did what I did. And she said, well, you should go to this place Under the Hood. I just did a story about them. They opened up this week, and you should talk to them. And I did, and it floored me because in all my time as a service member and all my time growing up in the military, like even the kids in the you know, even the extended community of the military did not talk about the military like this, did not talk about those experiences. Floored. And so there was a group of active duty GIs there that had helped organize it. Cindy Thomas was the first manager there. And she's also a family member in Coat Pink. And there were VFP members that were there. And we'd all seen the movie Sir No Sir, of course. And we'd all learned about the Oleo Strut, which is the coffee house that was the coffee house from 68 to 72 there in Colleen. And does anybody know what an Oleo Strut is? If you've seen Sir No Sir, you probably do, no? Okay, an Oleo Strut is a helicopter part. It's a shock absorber. And the idea behind, I guess, the naming is that this was a place that the community could come and relieve the shock of this experience. Well, anyway, Cindy and the soldiers there invited me to Austin just a few weeks later, still February 2009, where IVAW was doing a Winter Soldier panel. And I was really, again, floored by, I had never been exposed to IVAW, VFP. I didn't know about these things before the coffee house. And wow. Anyway. So in the 5 years that we've been there, we've done a lot of things. We've served as a community resource, educating service members and community members about their rights with the help of the GI Rights Hotline and the Military Law Task Force. And we've organized actions there. We're less than a mile from the gate. You can walk and walk back mostly pretty easily. We've also worked on campaigns with Veterans for Peace and IVAW. This, in summer of 2011 and 2012, we worked with Operation Recovery, IVAW campaign, and went on post and collected 1,500 signatures of service members, veterans, community members on base to pledge to stop the deployment of traumatized troops. And that's we need to stop deployment of all the troops. But if we could start with the injured troops, then that's most of the fighting force. And the logic being that the rest would follow. It wouldn't be sustainable. It's not sustainable. But we also did about 400 follow-up visits with these people, and we collected dozens of really in-depth pages of testimony. And that work continues with the Fort Hood report, which is going to be coming out here within the next few months, a collection of those testimonies. We've also worked with VFP and March Forward recently in campaigns, successful campaigns, to let service members know that they don't have to deploy to Afghanistan necessarily, that there are options. And we've had 2 conscientious objectives this year. This picture here is from Veterans Day of 2012. And this is the Veterans Day parade. The city of Colleen sanctioned, let's yellow ribbons and flags all over the place. The top of the banner there says, "Honor all who served." That was the theme of the parade, and to get into it, we had to incorporate "Honor all who served" into our messaging. And so we sort of tried to ask, what does that mean? Is the way that we treat our community's wounds, is that in honor of them? And so what that is in the back, it's a giant mock-up of a pill bottle. And there's a veteran inside in uniform shaking the pill bottle, trying to escape as we go down the parade route. And the conversations that happened, they were really powerful and sort of frightening at times, but like tellingly frightening. People were shouting out, listing their prescriptions. Little kids were like, "Get out of there, soldier!" Oh God, oh God. But through that, we were able to generate a conversation, create a space for the community to talk about these things and have those conversations, and hopefully work through the contradictions that people have to hold when they're in the military or in the military community. So last summer, we did a lot of organizational sort of structuring, and we have a new board. We've had a new board, and we've been on the phone a lot in that time, but we just had our first in-person meeting in the space, which is really valuable, just in January. And during that time, we thought about how change happens. And not just any change, because change is always going on. But the sort of change that we want to see happen, how does that happen? How do we affect that? And we determined, looking back at what we'd done and the way that we had done things and thinking about the future, the way we wanted to do things, that change happens when we meet the needs of our community. And largely that's letting people know about their rights, because that's a need that people have. But also referrals to mental health and legal, and there's a ton of little very personal ways. Giving somebody a ride to the VA, letting somebody who's been picked up for AWOL and picked up out of their life that they moved on to, and now they're all of a sudden they're back at Fort Hood in their old unit and being treated like crap. Giving them community. So meeting the needs of the community and shifting the culture. So some of I think some of these work to shift the culture, but also, there's a cultural need. So a lot of these have multifaceted sort of possibilities. We also, in addition to the GI rights, we have a meal once a week on Thursdays and popular education around those rights. We have paper making workshops where service members and family members and community members can make paper, mostly out of uniforms, repurposed, but also out of recruiting material that we collect with some partners in Austin who Sustainable Options for Youth. They collect art supplies for us from the recruiters. We have Colleen Poetry Slam, a poetry group that's been in Colleen longer than Under the Hood has, and we're really privileged to be able to work with them because a lot of people don't think Colleen when you think, what's in Colleen? Just the military. But these folks shine and prove that there's more than that. 3 years ago, they took second nationally in the Poetry Slam competitions. So putting Colleen on the map for something other than tanks. And we also host art shows, and I'm really happy to see the War is Trauma portfolio back here. Not the whole thing, but most of it. That's what we do a number of art shows, but I picked this one because this is the one that's pretty familiar with most folks, and I encourage folks to check that out. So the Aleo Strut there was a newspaper that was run out of the Aleo Strut, Fatigue Press. I keep adding an S, sorry. Just this last October, Under the Hood applied with the FCC with the help of Prometheus Project, which is a radio project, and Austin Airwaves down there in Austin, and other community radio groups. With their help, we applied to the FCC for a low-power FM radio license. And in January, we were approved. So. And hopefully we'll be able to utilize that in a way that both meets the needs of the community by letting them know about their rights and letting them know about services and getting them connected with their neighbors and their community. But also, to shift the culture, of course, we're going to reach most of the barracks on post. We're going to reach the two main gates where traffic backs up for PT. We're going to reach downtown Colleen, which is a really underrepresented community, and the whole of Colleen, pretty much, to the edge of Cove and Harker Heights. I don't know how your Fort Hood geography is, but so we're going to continue that work, and thank y'all for coming. I'm going to
Thank you, Malachi. My partner Helen Jackard here in the bright VFP shirt, we're traveling in Germany actually almost 2 years ago, and where we had the honor of meeting Andre Shepard, who's an African-American Iraq veteran who refused to redeploy to Iraq and is seeking political asylum in Germany. He's been turned down but has appealed to the European Court, which has agreed to hear his appeal, and we're looking forward to some good news there, hopefully. But we were also able to visit Kaiserslautern, Germany, and to be present for the grand opening of the Clearing Barrel GI Bar and Coffee House. And at that point we met Micah Kops-Schubert here, who's a longtime German peace activist who's worked with U.S. veterans and GIs for quite a while, and she is a co-founder and manager of the Clearing Barrel. So Micah, give Micah a big hand and she'll tell us all about it.
Hi. I would like to start with telling you, like, how did I get involved with this work at all. My hometown is Hanau, next to Frankfurt in Germany, and Hanau used to be the biggest American outpost overseas for a long, long time. I think like up to the late 60s, mid 70s, I'm not sure. There were times where there were 148,000 military personnel just in the Hanau garrison, so you can you have an idea how it is probably to live in a garrison town. Living in a town like that, or growing up in a town like Hanau, you of course always were in touch with Americans all the time. I also have like dual citizenship and have family on the East Coast. My mom grew up in Boise, and so that is the connection. But yeah, the main connection was that over the years, of course, you like ran into a lot of people. You hung out together. You went to shows and yeah, went drinking together, whatever. So there was always like a good connection to the Americans. In 2000, by the end of 2002, when it got pretty clear that the Iraq war was going to happen, I had a couple of friends, and it was pretty clear that they had to be part of the invasion into Iraq. And I was just really desperately thinking, I don't want these guys to go. I don't want anyone to do this, to be in that situation. And so I was desperately seeking for people. There must be some Americans out there who actually help these guys to do something. And in February of 2003, you probably remember, there were like massive demonstrations, millions of people all over the world. Of course, the US government didn't give a flying shit about it. But there was a big blockade at the Frankfurt Air Base. The air base used to be in Frankfurt. And at that blockade, I ran into a group of people that really changed my life, so to say. They had like a huge banner saying like, "Stop the War Brigade." And I was like, what? Who are these guys? And these guys were Vietnam veterans against the war people, and also David Carson, a conscience objector from the last Gulf War, '91. He was actually beat into the plane and sent anyways. So I met these two guys who really impressed me and changed my life. Darnell Stephen Summers, some of you might have heard that name, and Dave Blalock. They're both in the Sir Nostr movie, and they got me in touch with the Military Counseling Network. The Military Counseling Network was founded by the Mennonite Peace Committee way back in the mid-'80s, and is the only GI rights hotline branch outside of the US. So I got in touch with them and started to work in a support group around the Military Counseling Network for many years. In 2010, around 2010, the Mennonite Peace Committee was thinking about, like how to go on with that work. And of course, there were money issues, of course, because they couldn't afford to have volunteers come over from the States to do that work anymore. And they also kind of shifted their work more on Christian peacemaker teams. And my then husband, I'm married to an Iraq veteran as well. He deserted in 2007. But my husband and I just decided, said, we gotta keep this going. This is so important. There's no way of stopping this work. So we started to think about, how could we go on providing this important work of counseling and GI rights work. And then we came up with the idea, hey, let's do a coffee house. That was something I always wanted to. I always wanted to have a GI coffee house. So we had to think, if we want to do a GI coffee house, we gotta do it where all these Americans are. And by that time, it just had to be Kaiserslautern, K-Town, because that's like a major hub for all the wars the US is having all over the place. So yeah, you guys might want to know, a lot of people think what the hell are these Americans still doing in Europe, I asked myself that question a lot too. I mean, I'm a kid of the '80s, so I was very aware of, the Cold War scenario. And when the wall came down, I at least thought yes, we're over with it. It's, we don't need those Americans here anymore to protect us from the Russians, for example. Well, it turned out that was not the case. It turned out that, Germany is still a very strategic, important place for the US military to be. I want to talk about that a little bit. I don't know if you can see the map really clear, well, the fact that, you know, like the idea, you know, like the Americans protecting us from the Russians, it's still there. They're building up a new missile shield, supposedly not against the Russians, but it's there anyways. Also, there's like 2 major military installations or things that are very important right now. Germany seats the headquarters of the European Command. And also what gets more and more important in the past several months is the African Command. We've been hearing a lot about the drone operations going on in Africa, and also obviously they don't send like huge chunks of troops down there, but they send a lot of special forces troops to Africa, and it's not really too clear what the hell they are doing there. I know, where, like in the cafe, we have a lot of Air Force around, and like people, you know, like active duty people come in and say like, "Hey, I'm gonna be away for 3 or 4 weeks," and I ask like, "Yeah, where are you going?" "Well, Africa." "Like where?" "Can't tell." "What are you doing?" "Can't tell." You know, so what's also strategically important is the drone warfare that's going on. The Africa Command in Germany, it sits in Germany, is the place where all these drone operations in Africa are, what's the word? Controlled, thank you. And also the Ramstein Air Base, and that is right next to K-Town, Kaiserslautern, plays a really important role in that. There are no drones launched from German soil, supposedly, but what happens at the Ramstein Air Base is they get the pictures the civilian drones are taking, and I saw pictures of these rooms. They have like these huge rooms there and huge screens where they can actually like live see the pictures the civilian drones are taking. So so if there's a drone operation going on in Africa, it's Africa making a decision on where to go to. The people in Ramstein sent these pictures out to, for example, New Mexico, where you have someone with the joystick actually operating the killer drones. And yeah, so it's all like really interconnected. Yeah. And here it is, the clearing barrel. And also I would like to ask if someone knows what a clearing barrel is. Well, a clearing barrel is a barrel. The military personnel is supposed to clear out their ammunition out of their weapons before they, I don't know, go to the chow hall or wherever. So yeah, the name of the cafe has also like a double meaning, so to say. People can come in and unload. Yeah, the cafe is in the middle of Kaiserslautern. Kaiserslautern is a pretty small town, actually. Has 90,000 Germans living there, plus 50,000 Americans. That's not all active duty people, that's also family members and a lot of civilian contractors working there. The Ramstein Air Base is of course huge, and what's also around the corner is the Landstuhl Medical Center. That's like the largest military hospital outside of the US, and in times of the Iraq war, and also nowadays, of course, everyone that got wounded in one way or the other had to go through that hospital. But yeah, we're in the middle of the town. As you might see in the background, we also have like this great exhibition up, War's Trauma. So when you walk in, you know where you're walking in. The nice thing about the cafe is it is open to everyone. So, of course, a lot of students come in, and a lot of peace movement people come in, and a lot of young people, and a lot of old people, and also a lot of active duty people, or Americans that work as civilians. And we have couches, and I think the main idea of the cafe is to be an open space for everyone, and yeah, where they can just come in and be what they are, so to say. And the nice thing is, with all these couches, people cannot like sit separate on a table and not talk to anyone. They all have to sit in one room, and there's a lot of intercommunication taking place, and that's really nice. Of course, we do a lot of events. What brings in the most people, of course, is like we do music shows, like from punk to jazz to what have you. And of course, that is something where a lot of people just come in and enjoy themselves, but also have the chance to, yeah, like meet people and start talking if they want to talk. And but we also, of course, have political events, if you like to call it that way. Showing documentaries about what's going on inside the military, and also it's good on one side to have the Germans coming in, understand what we do and where we come from, and on the other side, of course, it gives Americans, active duty civilians, a chance to inform themselves about all kinds of things. I'm a little bit stuck right now. It's okay? Yeah, sorry, it's been, we're on the road for quite a while. I'm kind of stuck. Well, but yeah, I guess that is what I was trying to say.
Thank you, Micah. I wanted to acknowledge, before I continue, I wanted to acknowledge Alex Bacon here. Many of you know Alex. Alex is he's a Coast Guard veteran. He's a co-founder of Coffee Strong, and he's currently director of operations there. Or is that your title, something like that? That's what I heard somewhere. He gets a little different titles, but he also has. I really want to thank Alex for all the work he's done to make this tour a real success. And he helped put it all together and keep it organized. And he's been traveling on the whole tour representing Coffee Strong. But since we've been up in the Northwest, he's turned over that job to some of the other staff and volunteers at Coffee Strong. And we're really lucky today to have with us Sandra Sampson. She is a veteran who has a tale to tell, and she's now a GI rights counselor at Coffee Strong. Come on up, Sandra.
I'm short. Good? Okay. Nope. Yes? Can you hear me? Okay. Is it going to stay? Okay. So hi, I'm Sandra. I am the newest GI rights counselor at Coffee Strong, and what that means is that there's a group of us who help service members, people that are still in, resolve their issues. And that could be anything from a UCMJ action, they ran out of money because they're a very lower enlisted and they don't know where to turn to pay their bills, or something like a medical discharge is not going right. So we help them read the regulations and figure out exactly what they can do for themselves. Because a lot of times when you're in the military, you're not really going to know your regulations. The Army doesn't want you to know the regulations. So we try to help them figure out what they can do to help themselves. And the reason that I've decided to come up is to tell you why these coffee houses are so important. I have a personal experience with them, and mine is after the fact, but I want to tell you why these are so valuable. So I always wanted to join the military. I'm almost 40, and my mother always said no, and of course I listened to my mother. And went to college, got married, got divorced, and at 32 I was like, okay, I still want to join the military. I didn't want to join because of the war. It was just, I had a grandfather that I respected, my father. It was just in me, and I always thought I couldn't physically do it. So at 32, on a whim, I joined the Army Reserve. And my employer wanted to kill me, and my mother wanted to kill me. But I was really proud of my decision. It's something that I needed to do. It was my way of giving. And I enlisted. I have 2 master's degrees, but I enlisted because that was my way of giving. I wanted to be in the trenches to give back to those kids. I didn't have kids. I don't have sisters and brothers, so this was my way to be an influence and challenge myself. So I was pretty proud of my decision. So I joined in June 2008, and December 2009, I mobilized to deploy. And before I had mobilized, let me backtrack. So I'm reserves and guard. I'm a part-timer. And part-time is very different from active duty. There is a huge lack of discipline. We see each other once a month, twice a year, you know, twice or 2 weeks out of the year. And if we're lucky, we all get to deploy and hang out with each other. So these are folks that I never really cared for. Like I said, the lack of discipline. Sometimes things were not always done by the book. Whatever. So I figured when we were going to train up to deploy, things might change. Well, no. So my direct supervisor, my warrant officer, was sending me sexually harassing emails and started down that long path of, oh, great, I have to work for this guy for, you know, a year. So I did the right thing, and I reported it. And my commander said, I went to my platoon sergeant, of course, who then went to my commander. My commander said, when we mobilize, when we get to Fort Lewis from New Jersey, where are you? It'll be taken care of. So I trusted these people. Why not? I'm an E4, and these are my chain of command. When I got to Fort Lewis, the reverse happened. That warrant officer was really pissed off at me because I had said something and told on him, and my commander didn't know. He even said, I don't know what the process is. I have to look into it, and when we're here in a month, you'll know. That should have been my clue. If I had known Coffee Strong existed and was right outside the gate, I could have had someone help me from the beginning. That was number one. I could have just gone right out the gate when we had our weekends free because we were here for a month and gotten someone to help me figure out what can I do, because obviously telling the command didn't do anything. I didn't know. So I deploy on Valentine's Day, and we went to Qatar, vacation. No weapons, 2 beers a day. It's an R&R spot. It's a absolutely wonderful place to deploy, unless you're a lack of discipline reserve and guard unit. So the thing about my unit, not all are like this, but I do know that there is a commonality with this. When you take a bunch of people who are on vacation and put them somewhere else, it's almost like hedonism. And I wanted nothing to do with that. I don't care if my commander's sleeping with one of the specialists. I don't care if my warrant officer's sleeping with the captain. I want nothing to do with it. Well, not wanting something to do with it got me sexually assaulted by my platoon sergeant that I reported the warrant officer to. If I had known about Coffee Strong after it happened, instead of going through the big hassle of reporting it and the whole world knowing, I could have called them up and maybe gotten some confidential help and gotten quietly under the radar to help myself. I didn't know this. So I report to these people for the next 10 months. I'm not allowed to leave. It's a 2-mile radius post. I become addicted to Xanax. That's the only thing I'm allowed to do. And every single person but 2 in my unit turn on me, even the women. I ruined the fun, I was told. The chaplain was really hands-off because it was out of the chain of command, and it was a legal issue. I was told the whole time that things were unfounded. It never happened. It never happened. It never happened. I had so many investigations done, but I didn't know what these investigations were. I didn't know what the process was. If I had known about Coffee Strong, I could have picked up the phone or emailed them and asked them, what is this? I tried to commit suicide. If I had known about Coffee Strong, I probably wouldn't have gotten to that point of feeling so helpless and by myself. So I was stuck there for 10 months. In the rear, nobody cared. My mother cared. My mother did the best she could to yell at everyone and congressman this, congressman that, and all it did was come back to hurt me. If I had known about Coffee Strong, I could have found out what that meant when my mother contacted my congressman. So they were so angry at me. I suffered through that, and they wouldn't let me fly back with them. When we came back, I was advanced party, and advanced party mean putting me on a C-130 with 3 caskets. And I had to sit there for 72 hours and stare at people that I felt really served their country, because I really didn't. I'm over there fighting with my own people. So that was pretty traumatizing, and I got back, and I immediately got dumped at Fort Dix and put into mental health away. I didn't see anybody ever again. Done. Boom. Gone. They're all gone out of my life. Right? It's easy. Put me in mental health. They don't know what to do with me. Well, you live 45 minutes from here. Why don't you go home at night? Perfect. I will drink myself to death while I come back every day. They absolutely did not do the right thing for me. If I had known about Coffee Strong, I could have called them and asked them, I'm demobilizing, what can I do for myself? So, since I had never seen them again, and I had another investigation, and they came back and told me it wasn't guilty, don't know what to tell you, you're still, barking up the wrong tree. I decided to switch to National Guard because I wasn't going to report to these people again. Because I was getting off this plane and demobilizing meant I had to go back to drill in 3 months, and nothing was going to be different. I was petrified because I thought they were going to kill me while I was deployed. So I got a conditional release, and I decided to go to OCS because screw them, I'll outrank them. Well, I hadn't put the uniform on, I hadn't done anything for myself except go to the VA, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. But so I walked into OCS first day, I'm like, I can do this, F them, this is great. I'm there literally 5 minutes, and the first instructor walks in. It's the first male I'd seen in an Army uniform. I had such a panic attack, I had a seizure. So I had gotten kicked to another unit, and didn't know what this meant. And if I had known about Coffee Strong, I could have called them up and asked them, oh my God, I can't go to OCS. What does this mean now? What black hole am I in? So on the other side, I had decided to go to the VA. Where else am I going to get help? I didn't know about Coffee Strong. I didn't know what my options were. And I literally walked in the door of the Philadelphia VA and just started crying and screaming for someone just to help me, and I broke down and thankfully got into some care. But if I had known about the coffee houses and Coffee Strong, I could have figured out what was going to happen. What does this mean now that I showed up at the VA? So I got kicked to, my enlisted spot in the National Guard, and the commander, a woman, took one look at my file, met me, and all I do is show up at my unit and I start to cry. I start to panic and cry. Like, I'm ridiculous if you put a uniform on me. And she said, you are sick. And I said, oh my God, ma'am, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like, it was such a relief to have somebody validate that I was sick. So she initiated a medical discharge for me. I got out with an honorable. And I didn't know what this meant, though. I didn't know that I was entitled to other things. And if I had known about Coffee Strong, I could have had a GI rights counselor help me with the process. I didn't know there was things I could do. I didn't know I had rights. I thought I signed all those away. So after OCS, I had another suicide attempt, and that's when the VA diagnosed me with PTSD. And then I had to do the big disability claim application, and I didn't know what that was either. And if I had known about the coffee houses, I would have had somebody help me. So I had no reason to come back to this area. Why? I mean, I'm from Jersey, born and raised. I actually got recruited for a job at Amazon. And lo and behold, I'm back out here where everything started. And I had heard about the coffee houses while I was going through my stuff when I got out. And I was always fascinated by it. And I was always looking for a platform. Because I'm one of the 28 that sued the federal government that sparked the Invisible War. I'm one of those. And that was like all I felt I could do. That was my voice. But it wasn't enough. So when I got the job here, I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to go find these people. So I've been fortunate enough to link up with them, and I plan on making this my platform. This is only my second time speaking about this, but I want to start a support group. I want to start some advocacy and outreach, and because of the coffee houses, we could probably save someone else. So that's my story.